Hi, this is Chuck McMurray from Emtec. We're going to get started now. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to join us for a webinar entitled 10 Ways to Improve Your Salesforce.com Application in 2013. This will be roughly a 30-minute presentation, and my name is Chuck McMurray. I'm an account executive with Emtec. And joining me today will be Dan Olson, who is a practice manager for our Eastern Salesforce.com practice. First, I'd like to go through just some quick housekeeping. This webinar is roughly 25 minutes with 5 minutes set for questions. There will be Q&A at the end of the presentation, so please ask any questions that you may have using the GoToMeeting chat panel. And this webinar is recorded. You will be sent a follow-up email with materials so that you can share these notes with your team. So what we're going to learn today, again, is the 10 ways that you can improve your Salesforce.com application in 2013. The ideas that we came up with for this content comes from discussions that we've had with new and current clients of Salesforce.com. And those discussions took place over the course of 2012. So we thought we would share with those with you for 2013 as anticipated ideas for what you can use. In each topic, we'll be discussing why the idea is valuable, how you can get started in trying to accomplish some of these things, and implementation considerations that should be accounted for. I do want to also tell you that Emtec is a certified Salesforce.com partner, and you can find us on the App Exchange there. Very quickly, I'd like to tell you a little bit more about who Emtec is so you understand who's on the telephone. Emtec is a full-service technology and business consulting firm. We have about 1,000 full-time professionals and 14 offices across the globe. We have practices that specialize in the areas of sales and marketing, human capital management, cloud computing, and more. And I would like to mention that we are also a 175-seat Salesforce.com enterprise installation and customer and have been for quite some time. At Emtec, we do have a dedicated practice focused on Salesforce and the ecosystem in cloud computing. We have a lot of heavy collaboration that happens for our clients with other Emtec practices, including the areas of ERP, business intelligence, project management, and custom development. So we are, in essence, a one-stop shop for all of your needs related to Salesforce and other applications. So at this time, I would like to introduce Dan Olson. Dan is the practice manager, again, for our Eastern Salesforce.com practice. Brings many years' experience in not only consulting and configuration, but also sat in the seat of being an administrative person at a manufacturer installing Salesforce.com, and has been very successful in doing that. So at this time, I'd like to turn it over to Dan, and take it away, Dan.
Thanks, Chuck. As Chuck said, I'm Dan Olson, and I'll be walking us through the 10 ways to improve your Salesforce.com application in 2013. So without any further ado, let's jump right into it. So number 10 is leveraging your home page as a one-stop shop. What do we mean by that? Well, the home page is the first thing users see when they log on. So the goal of this action item is to make that home page as useful to your users as possible. And in keeping with the theme of why it's valuable, how to get started, and a few considerations, it's valuable because it allows your users to stay within the application, and that encourages user adoption. You can provide links to some of their critical systems for easy access, and such as internal portals, things like that. If you are going to do that, consider implementing the single sign-on functionality. With single sign-on, your users won't be required to re-enter their credentials when moving to a different system from within Salesforce.com. So how do you get started doing that? First, identify the commonly used systems that have the information your users are accessing outside of Salesforce.com. If you identify those, you can start bringing them into Salesforce as links or sections on a page. And remember, avoid the temptation of adding too much onto the home page. Avoid clutter. Simple really is better. So a few things to consider while you're doing that. Some things that we've seen some of our clients put on the home page are customizable news feeds. You can have that kind of a scrolling news feed in a custom section. As I said earlier, links to portals, the internal websites. We also see customers taking and creating a visual force section and embedding graphics for analytics that might be generated outside of Salesforce, for example, say in business objects. So those are some ideas kind of beyond the standard dashboard, calendar, and tasks sections that you see on a standard web homepage. One other point to remember is, different home pages for different functional groups. So plan your layouts by functional groups. Customer service users are going to need to see different things than, say, sales users might. The number 9 way to improve your Salesforce application in 2013 is getting social. So what are we talking about when we say getting social? We're talking about Chatter, and we're talking about Work.com. Why it's valuable is if you implement Chatter, you can quickly reduce email volume. It prevents a lot of those conversations that go around organizations with reply all, and then reply all, and the chain of email grows and grows. And it's not really useful to anybody outside of the chain. Using Chatter, the conversation unfolds on the Chatter platform. It's searchable, therefore it has lasting value after the conversation is done, and the conversation's inside of Chatter and not in your email. Also, crowdsourcing is a huge advantage of using the social tools inside of Salesforce. Users may not know who to ask to get an answer to their question. They may suspect who the expert would be and throw an email out, but if they post their question in Chatter, the crowd will come back with the answer, and the expert may not be who you thought it was. Answers happen quicker. Everybody gets to see the answer at the same time, and you've done great collaboration amongst your users. Also, using Chatter shrinks your organization or shrinks the enterprise. A lot of times we have geographically diverse teams in our clients. By using Chatter or a Chatter group to work on a project, you've brought them all together in one space to work, and all of their conversation and efforts are captured inside that Chatter platform. Briefly on gamification or performance management using Work.com. Work.com has badges. You can do recognition. You can give awards, and you can do performance management by setting goals, and your users can track to their goals. Again, it's all social. When they're given a recognition badge by a manager, everybody on the platform sees it, and there's that social aspect to it. So how do you get started doing that? Think about the desired outcomes and use cases. How do you want to see people using these tools? And list those out so you can understand the goals you're driving towards. Create some metrics and rewards for the Work.com component. And then also, it's a very good recommendation to create usage guidelines. Clients we've helped implement Chatter appreciate when you can put out a kind of code of conduct for what's appropriate, what's not appropriate on a social platform. Not everybody gets that, so that's very useful to have on handout. And some key implementation considerations. You have to monitor and nurture anything you do. If you're not seeing adoption what you want it to be, you can reach out to those people and find out why they're not using the platform and help them out. Another big thing is if executives are using Chatter, then everybody's listening. Everybody wants to know what their C-level executives are doing. If they're chattering about it, you're going to get better adoption. And then, of course, have a plan, communicate dates, have a training plan to walk people through how to use these tools, and then, of course, go back and monitor. The number 8 item on our list is supporting a multi-device mobile strategy. So really, the world is mobile at this point. So how do we go about doing that, and why would it even be valuable? So if we look at that, many organizations are adopting a bring-your-own-device strategy, and many users are looking to use their mobile devices more even than their laptops or desktop computers. In fact, a recent study said that 65% of workers in 2012 consider their mobile device to be the most critical work device, and that's up from 13% in 2011. So that's a pretty big jump towards the mobile platform. And so how do you kind of embrace that? I mean, it does improve user satisfaction. It gets key information in their hands if they're not at their laptop or they're not somewhere where they're necessarily have internet available. Their mobile device probably does. So how do you get started doing that? First off, understand that not all mobile devices are equal. So when you're creating mobile configurations, keep in mind that an Android device might look a little different than, say, an iOS device or a BlackBerry, and create your mobile profiles accordingly to maximize or optimize the user experience. And remember, don't put all the data on the mobile configuration. Only put the data that's necessary. It's not meant to be the full Salesforce experience, but it is something you need to consider. And then consider implementing Salesforce Touch. That runs very well right now on the iPad. And as you're using that, if you've got Visual Force sections or pages in your application and you want those on your mobile devices, test them first. They may render slightly differently in Touch depending on the device. So look those over, and just remember to look into mobile licensing costs as well. Moving forward, the number 7 thing you can do to improve your Salesforce application in 2013 is implementing a user adoption and training strategy. And that isn't necessarily something that's so specific to Salesforce. It's just good business practice, but we'll talk about the benefit of doing that with your Salesforce application. So really why it's valuable is you keep your users engaged, you keep adoption up, they're using the platform, they're using the tools you've built, which means you're getting a return on your investment. And if you keep the users engaged and you're doing consistent training, it means your users are likely using the system in the same way. So repeatable process, everybody's using it the same way, we can be effective and trained to that. And your new employee ramp-up time is reduced. So as new employees come on, the training is relevant, it's tied to the latest release, they're up and running quickly, and they're more productive, and that's valuable. So how do you get started doing that? Keep your eye on the new functionality release schedule. Salesforce.com puts out new releases throughout the year. Keep your eye on that. Keep your training up to date. And make sure you define the core concepts and functionality of using Salesforce. Outline what an account is, how it relates to an opportunity or a contact or a case if you're doing customer service training opportunities. Make sure you've got those core concepts down in the beginning before you start training on some of perhaps the custom objects and functionality you've built out on the platform. And then do the training, make sure it's role-based, define use cases, and those should be by function. So customer service users, again, would have different training very likely than a sales user would. And some considerations are Salesforce.com has an extensive amount of training material for you to use. Leverage that. It's excellent, excellent material. And then another thing we've seen our clients enjoy are quick reference guides. They're small cards. It's a one-page sheet for topics with things like how do I create an opportunity, how do I submit a case, things like that. So they don't have to go through all their training material. They've got these quick reference cards. All right. The number 6 idea for improving your Salesforce application is continuous improvement. Again, not necessarily Salesforce specific, but certainly something useful to implement on your Salesforce application. So why is that valuable? Because businesses are constantly evolving, and we see our clients' businesses evolving. And if they're not periodically assessing the Salesforce application and adjusting it to meet their needs, they're going to get out of alignment. So to have a continuous improvement strategy is very useful to make sure that you keep your application fresh, user experience is clean, it's streamlined, and adoption stays up because there's not a lot of pieces to the application that are no longer relevant. And of course, it improves the ease of maintenance. If there's less things in there, there's less to maintain. So just keep it to what's absolutely needed. So some starters on that, look things over like the role hierarchies, page layouts. Look at unused fields. You can see which fields are being used, which aren't. Look at dormant users. Check logons. See when users are logging in. If they're not logging in, get them into the user adoption and training program. Get them some training. And if they really don't need to use the application anymore because their job title or job function has changed, then repurpose those licenses to users that can use them. A final thing we see lots of clients need is a review of their sales process. There's a tendency to put too many stages in your opportunity sales process, and it slows down sales, and it does affect adoption. So review that periodically as well and keep it to the minimum number of steps as possible. And before you make any changes, once you've identified them, run them through with your governance team and make sure everybody understands the impact of these things. Once you got to that point, let your users know what's changing. If it's significant enough, let them know when it will change and how it will impact them. Keep the what's in it for me concept in mind. And then test any changes you're going to make in your sandbox first. The most well-planned out modifications don't always have intended results. Sandbox is a great place to test these things out. No angry users when you do that. The number 5 idea is to audit your instance against new functionality. That is similar to what we just talked about, but it's actually a little more specific, just looking at new functionality inside of Salesforce. When we're talking about those release cycles. So the value could be a new feature might be coming up that solves an existing issue that you've had on your kind of product backlog that you don't know how to solve yet. Or a new feature may be implemented in the release that solves a problem you had previously solved with custom functionality. So you can get rid of your custom functionality. It's less maintenance, and likely the native Salesforce functionality is going to run a little better than what you built. So there's a lot of opportunity in there to streamline your application and leverage this new functionality. So some of the things to get started on are, it may sound like the obvious, but review the release notes and review the video training that comes with it. You get a little bit different out of both. They're both valuable to look at. And then look over each new feature coming out in the new release and rate it to see if it's going to be of value to your organization. Once you get that list together for the new release, you need to plan, communicate, test, and launch that. So plan when you're going to do it, communicate it to your users, test it in Sandbox, and then launch it. And some good examples of those are, when roll-up summary fields came out, that was a big thing for a lot of our clients. The ability to filter dashboards is a huge thing. You can reduce the number of dashboards immediately, and that's less maintenance and less clutter for your users. So things like that are what we're talking about here. The number 4 idea for improving your Salesforce application in 2013 is to use automation capabilities to reduce manual effort. What we're talking about here are workflows, triggers, things like that. So let's kind of dive right into that. The value is really, in a nutshell, removing redundant manual tasks. It improves user adoption and process improvement. If you've automated it, it means it's happening the same way every time. There's no variation. You can improve your process and ensure that it's all being done the same. And redundant manual tasks, user satisfaction drops down. If you can eliminate some of those, then you've got more satisfied users. Adoption stays up. They're using the tool that you're building out. So how do you get started using that? First thing is to identify some manual processes. Who are the candidates that you could possibly automate? And when you've got a few, get all the stakeholders in the room and whiteboard the process out. Literally flow chart it and talk about how it should go and how it will impact the various end users and their teams. It's very important to get all the right people in the room, not just a couple people, because it's going to impact everybody. So fill the room with the right people. And some implementation considerations. Remember that not all functionality is available on all editions. For example, Professional Edition does not support workflow. So kind of know what edition you have and what's available to you for that. And some examples of automation we've seen for our clients are automatic approval of opportunities, automatically sending notification email for things like when cases are closed or large deals have been closed. Scheduling reports to refresh and email out to key stakeholders is useful. You don't have to have someone on task to remember that. And automatically creating assets on an account when an opportunity closes that had opportunity products on it. That is a huge time saver for a lot of our clients, and we see that time and time again. So those are things that you might consider when you talk about automating some things inside of Salesforce. Moving right on to the number 3 item is bringing other functional groups onto the platform. So a lot of our clients will implement Salesforce with 1 or 2 functional user groups in mind, say sales and sales ops. They'll be the first ones on the platform with the new implementation, and they'll build out for them, and they're very effective using it. But if you think about what other functional groups that group would talk to, so in the case of sales, they're probably talking to customer service quite a bit and probably marketing quite a bit, like 1 degree of separation from sales. Those are good candidates to look at bringing onto the platform for synergies. So the value is just that. It's all about synergy. They're all looking at the same data at the same time. If there's notes, the customer service has put in an account. If they have a case open on an account, the sales rep will know that walking into the account and not walk into a bee's nest. So there's really good synergy going on there. And also, if you could bring a functional group onto the Salesforce platform, there's a chance you could eliminate the system they were previously using, which reduces maintenance costs, licensing costs, things like that. So there's lots of benefits to doing that. And to get started, we just talked about, think about that first degree of separation from the core users and look at those functional user groups, such as customer service or marketing. And then look at the core features as well. Not everything has to be built out custom. Look at how you can modify the core features like cases and some of the marketing things like marketing campaigns, accounts contacts. How can they be modified to support those other groups if their needs are slightly different? And then thinking about some implementation considerations. Sometimes these other groups are using standalone applications that really don't make sense to port onto Salesforce. If that's the case, consider opening a web tab and loading their application there, so at least they're staying within the Salesforce platform and they're working, all from the same spot. And as we said previously, plan it out, communicate the change, communicate the dates, and test it all in the sandbox first. Getting closer, the number 2 idea for improving your Salesforce application is to enrich and improve your data. And what that's really all about is deduplicating the data and augmenting your existing records. Those are the 2 main things. So we'll focus more on deduplicating right now. And really, duplicates cause a lot of issues. If you've got duplicate opportunity records, your pipeline is inflated incorrectly, your forecast is going to be off. If you're tied into your order management system, that could translate into manufacturing more product than you need or less than you need, perhaps. Also, if you've got a duplicate account and 2 users are looking at 2 different versions of the account, you've got a big chance for misalignment there, and that could possibly have some bad side effects later. So duplicates are a serious issue. Also, user confidence in the system is diminished. We've seen clients that do their initial Salesforce implementation. They're porting over lots of different data from different systems onto the Salesforce platform, and they know they're going to have some amount of duplicates no matter how well they try and scrub it. And that's kind of something they say they'll live with and they'll circle back and get to it. The problem is you're always very busy, and if you don't plan to look for duplicates and address them, you're really not going to circle back and get to them, and they kind of grow and fester, and that affects user confidence in the data. They're constantly seeing the same duplicates. So come up with a plan, a scheduled plan to review this, to audit your data, and to resolve the duplicate records. And consider using the standard Salesforce account merge and contact merge functionality. If you need something more sophisticated or powerful, there's lots of tools on the App Exchange to use. For augmenting your data, think about the data.com tool within Salesforce. It's really crowdsourced information around contacts and also augmenting good business data on accounts from the D&B feed. In fact, Emtec uses that technology very effectively inside of our org, and it helps identify new opportunities. If you're running reports and looking for prospects and opportunities, augmented account data really can help you identify new opportunities. So just some things to watch out for. As you're merging records, think about who owns the final surviving record and what the visibility needs to be. And that is also going to translate down into reports and list views and things like that. So think it through when you're doing merging of data. We've made it to the number 1. The number 1 idea for improving your Salesforce application in 2013 is integrating with other systems. We hear this over and over from our clients. They've got a great running Salesforce implementation, and they want to tie it in with their other business systems. So the value there is getting some of that rich organizational data into your users' hands. And when I say your users, your Salesforce users' hands. And good to integrate it with Salesforce, but take that thought one step further and think about the mobile platform. You can take ERP data and push it right onto their mobile device, so they've got actionable data. They have order history, things like that, coming from ERP through Salesforce onto their mobile devices. We've also seen a lot of manual data migration. They used to call it the sneaker net, but people exporting data from exterior systems into spreadsheets, importing it into Salesforce, comparing it to Salesforce data. That's a lot of manual effort and ripe with opportunity for error. By integrating the 2 systems together, you eliminate that need and you control the quality of the data coming in and out. And you can also augment your existing IT systems and add value to them by implementing or by integrating them with Salesforce. So how do you get started doing that? And it's kind of a simple question. What data would be the most useful to integrate, and then where is it? Identify the systems where the data is, and then build your integration points to those systems. And some common ideas would be that we see all the time are integrating Salesforce with an ERP system for customer master data, order data, unit sales data, invoices, things like this. Or if you've got a master data management strategy in place, implementing or integrating Salesforce to your MDM system for some of those same pieces of information and maybe even products as well. So there's lots of different integration tools out there. Salesforce's scripted data loader is a good one to use. If you're looking for something else, again, check the App Exchange for the variety of tools that could be available. And some implementation considerations on that are test in Sandbox first. Build your integrations in Sandbox. That's something that's important to do and test it out. You don't want to break anything in production. And then understand if you need to migrate or integrate the data real-time or batch. If it's inventory management and it's kind of need to know right now, then that's a real-time need. If you can batch up changes to the customer record and push them over at night and integrate them, that's probably a good strategy as well. So think it through for each integration point you're going to build. Also understand the security of the data coming in the survivorship. If you've got 3 systems updating a Salesforce account, which one takes precedence over the other? Is it last in wins, or is there one that has better trust than the other systems in the case of a conflict? And then think about the direction of integration. Does it go only from Salesforce out to the external systems, only from the external system into Salesforce, or is there a bi-directional synchronization of the data? So plan those out on paper first, talk them out before you start building the integrations, and you'll be more successful at that point. So those are the top 10 ways to improve your Salesforce application in 2013. And thank you for listening. At this point, I want to turn that over to Chuck McMurray.
Thanks, Dan, and great job. So we did get some questions submitted through the chat panel on GoToWebinar. And Dan, I think what I'll do here is I'll just go ahead and read these off, and then if you want to answer them somewhat short, we can at least kind of answer these. And if anybody has any questions that they want to dive much further into, feel free to give us a call, and we can absolutely help you to get those answered. So without further ado, first question comes from somebody over the chat panel, and that is, with mobile, do you recommend free applications as they are turnkey, or should we customize them, and how difficult is that?
So that's actually a very good question. So hate to give the standard "it depends" answer, but I'd say it depends, but here's some things to think about as you answer or as you think that through. So Salesforce Mobile Lite is a very useful application. It gets the core Salesforce information in your user's hands. Not a lot there you can actually configure, although it does do a good job of that. So if your users are just needing to look up some simple information, perhaps, accounts, contacts, opportunities, things like that, tasks, then the Mobile Lite platform is probably a good place to start and familiarize your users with that experience. As you start adding custom functionality to your Salesforce application, or you want to control different user experience depending on their type of device, then you would probably look into using the paid Salesforce mobile licenses where you have more control of what list views look like, things like that, which fields show up on the pages. That's probably when you'd want to start looking at those things.
Very good, Dan. Thank you. Second question is, what are you seeing in regards to complaints with Salesforce.com and Outlook integration, if any?
That's a good question. So, everybody still lives in email. As much as we talk about chat, or email is very important. And so integrating your email with Salesforce.com is pretty big on everyone's list when they're doing an implementation of Salesforce initially. And the Salesforce to Outlook connector is very useful, but the one thing we hear is, and it's kind of specific, but it's probably good to know to answer your question, it's when you create an email in Outlook and you want to flag that to be pushed up to Salesforce. Salesforce would do a great job matching on the email addresses in the To field or in the CC field, and it'll create an activity history record against that contact in Salesforce. The complaint comes in if you've got a BCC, if you've got a bunch of email addresses in BCC field in your email, and you'd like those, or the email attached to all of those contacts in Salesforce, that doesn't really happen as part of the standard connector, and that's the only complaint I've ever really heard.
Very good. Thanks, Dan. And the third is, how do we know when Salesforce.com has released advanced features and whether we are currently using them?
So your administrator is getting an email prior to the new release coming out and explaining, the release notes will be linked in there. They can review the release notes. So whoever the named administrators are in Salesforce, they get an email, and you have time to review those things and go through the process like we talked about in step number 5, auditing your instance against new functionality.
Very good, Dan. Thank you. At this time, we don't have any other further questions. I'd like to give just a few seconds to submit any last ones. Going? All right. Well, again, thank you for joining us for the top 10 applications to improve your 10 ways to improve your Salesforce.com application in 2013. This was Chuck McMurray and Dan Olson of Emtec on February 6th, 10 a.m., and we look forward to sending you some information and hope you'll join us for future webinars. Thank you very much.